haven't officially started yet. This is the spool up period, so
Mm.
don't get all your content out right now. This is an opportunity for people to start joining. So let's publish this live stream. Let's see if it's. Let me just check on Facebook to see that we're good. Oh yeah, there we are.
Yeah, it is. I can see myself and I can see Yvette on the live streaming.
So it is working. Cool. Oh yeah, and the title works and everything. See, it just works. I just like when things work.
There's even the caption, automatic captions working.
Oh yeah, that's pretty cool.
There we are.
Technology.
It will be a little bit messed up because of my accent. Most of the captioning system.
Yeah, let's test your accent and the captioning system. Let's hold on. What's a word that sounds funny in Portuguese?
Oh, that's you don't even go to Portuguese. Just try to say taekwondo.
Okay, taekwondo. Okay, Yvette, you say it.
What sport?
The one you've been doing all your life?
Oh,
ballet with a pajama.
Yeah.
Taekwondo. Is that what we're here to talk about? Oh.
Yeah, lots of taekwondo we're going to talk about. Well, actually, you know what? It is at top of the hour anyway, so maybe we will kind of just get into it. I think we will. This will be recorded anyway, so we can reshare it afterwards. But let's just get right into it. Hello, everybody. Master Ali Ghafour here, CEO of 2020 Armor and United Battle League. And I got some pretty cool guests with me. Coach / IR / former athlete, Cesar Valentim, who is now in Austria, and Olympian Yvette Yong, to talk about the new WT rules. There are a lot of them. And how do you interpret it from the perspective of an IR, former IR, / coach, a current athlete, and just talk about all of those things. I'll provide, so I'll be the host and moderator. I'll provide some context on kind of what we're doing on the 2020 Armor side, which is actually kind of funny because a lot of these rule changes are actually in line with some of the rules we've already implemented on 2020 Armor and UBL. And I'll give you kind of my thoughts on how the actual fight changes based on that, because I've been thinking about this for a long time. And yeah, so I'm really excited to have these guys with us, and girl with us, and we will have some Q&A at the end. So if you have some questions, go ahead and type them in the comments, and then we will address them at the end. Hi, Master Valentim, nice to see you. Master Jesse Isaacs, nice to see you as well. And so I know there's a lot of confusion. There's been about 2 games so far with the new rules, some with juniors and cadets, the one with seniors at the Spanish Open. And Master Cesar's been to both of them. Me and Yvette have been to one of them. And so, but first of all, I just would like to hear from our guests and let them introduce themselves. So Master Cesar, who he doesn't like being called Master or Sir by his friends. Sir, do you mind giving us a quick introduction for yourself? I told everybody, but you were a former IR and coach and all that. But when I looked at your bio, you've done a lot for a long time. So maybe just some of the stuff that I might have missed that the audience would feel would be interesting.
Well, trying to make it a little bit shorter.
Yeah.
My name is Cesar Valentim. I'm from Portugal, but I do live in Austria for almost 12 years. I've been coaching a private center, a club, and sometimes also the national team on specific events. Before working with just the club, I had worked with other federations. I worked with Brazil for 4 years, and before that, of course, with Portugal as a national team manager. And before that, more than 2 decades ago as an athlete. I've been also an IR, but not a very active one. In Pumse, yes. In Kurugi, I'm not that active. I was, but since I have my athletes competing in G class event, it wouldn't be fair for them if I would go and not take them along or not be able to coach them. So I am still an active IR, but I do very little tournaments, mostly friendly tournaments and small leagues. As a coach, I'm focused on the technical aspect, but I'm also an S&C coach. So, and as you know, I'm a very data-driven person, so I do a lot of S&C based on the new trends. I take the old school and I apply the new gadgets and tools that we have available these days, since technology is much more affordable than it was 20 years ago. And my life is wake up in the morning, do my planning, train my athletes, come back home, and in the meantime do these live streamings or a podcast if I have time for it.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for making time for us and doing that. And I think, and just for the audience, that's how we first connected. Actually, I didn't meet Cesar before the Belgium Open a couple of weeks ago, but we connected because a couple of friends said, "Hey, you like data, he likes data. You guys will probably geek out on this topic." And sure enough, we did. I think we talked for hours on end. And so that's how we connected. And obviously, Taekwondo community is a group of shared people with shared passion. So it was nice that we can continue that relationship and then talk on this podcast. So thank you, sir, for being here with us. And Master Yvette Yong, can you tell me who you are again? What you do? I don't really remember.
Well, I have been in the sport for a very, very long time. I've seen a lot of changes back and forth here and there. It's been quite interesting throughout all the years to see all those changes and seeing the changes revert back, kind of going back to the style before, which is what, 2020 has been trying to do, bring back the real fight. And, this is what we're here to talk about. So I don't know. I've seen so much change throughout my whole career, which has been since 1999. That's when I started Taekwondo.
Right. Yeah, because you fought before electronics. Yeah, you did before electronics, with electronics, and you're high performing both. And paper, yeah, that's right. So you have seen it. You're a rare breed in that you're 32 years old, and you've been fighting for a long time, and to continue. So you have literally all of them, from paper and pen to manual electronic to where we are today. So that's a great perspective, very unique perspective. And quickly, Yvette, just for the audience, your quick athletic background.
I've been on the national team since 2006 for senior. I've been on the junior national team since 2004 to 2008. There was an overlap of senior and junior in between 2007 when I was on team. And I'm still competing actively right now. I went to 2020 Tokyo for the Olympics, and I'm continuing to train right now.
Great. And if you couldn't guess, obviously from Team Canada, is where Yvette is from. So me and Yvette are both from Toronto. And so let's get right into it. These new rule changes. Again, you guys, we have a great set of speakers here from both the amount of years we've been in the sport. Oh, and for me, quickly, so I was also on the Canadian National Taekwondo team. Retired 2007. Went to the Pan Am Games and a couple, 3 World Championships as well. And so I have an athletic background as well, and I coach for a little bit, but not at an international level, more at a national level. So I think between the 3 of us, we have seen quite a lot. And I guess what I really want to get into it and start with Cesar. There's a lot of changes. If you could pick the biggest changes, and big means 2 things, from a referee's perspective and how they interpret and apply it, and then from an athlete's perspective on how they play the game. Can you choose a couple of those big changes and talk about those and see how the other coaches and referees that you've been chatting with these past few months, have they been kind of dealing with or interpreting them? And let's start the conversation that way.
Well, rules changing in Taekwondo is something that is probably very common to us. Probably the most standard tradition in Taekwondo is to change the rules, especially in the last 10 years. We've been changing a lot. We went to like pen and paper scoring, as you mentioned with Yvette, from a 12 by 12 competition area to an octagon that is 64 square meters. So those impacted the rules back then. The biggest change in this new version of the rules is definitely the 2 out of 3, the best of 3 competition system. The competition format speeds up the game a lot, makes the first round much more intense than before, leaves a lot less room for tactics on the field and a lot more to be prepared at home. So because you don't have the first round to study your opponent, it's going to be very risky for you if you lose the first round and then you have to dig yourself out of a inferiority position to win the second and third round.
Right. And just coach, sorry to interrupt, just for the audience. So what that is, the 2 out of 3 rounds. So instead of now, whoever has the most points at the end of third round, which is how it was always since the beginning of time, now it's whoever wins 2 out of 3 rounds. So if you ever play video games like Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Tekken, or you train with 2020 Armor, it's you first round, whoever has the most points, in our system, whoever has the most energy, wins the round. Next round starts. You both have 0-0 points. And then if you win both rounds, you win the game. Or if one person wins the first round, the other person wins the second round, then it goes to the third round. Whoever wins that one wins. So that's a completely different way of scoring the match, which has never been done before. And I think, I also agree that's probably the biggest significant change. And then, sorry, coach, so go ahead and explain some. You're describing some of the implications of all that.
Yeah, well, basically the implication is on the speed and the dynamics of the match, because you have a first round that is much more active than it used to be, especially in the senior divisions, because in the cadets you would always see a first round that would be very active.
Right.
You will also see rounds that are much shorter and competitions that are much shorter, because you don't have to wait for 2 minutes from the first round, 1 minute break, 2 minutes from the second round, and then only in the end of the second round the point gap would come into effect.
Right.
It still is a point gap not being applicable on the semifinals and finals for television purposes, but you get point gaps up to 12 points in each of the rounds, immediately starting the break. So you can have a first round that goes all the way to 30 seconds, have a 1 minute break, and then 30 seconds more, and the match is over. So it makes the match.
So I want to expand on that one as well, coach, because you're very familiar with the rules, and maybe a lot of people are not as much. So the point gap rule, meaning if you do a 1 round, and me and Yvette are fighting, and I have 12 points. Well, let's be realistic. She'll be 12 points ahead of me. Then the round would be over, and she would win that round automatically. And just like again, going back to video games, we use it as a reference because a lot of people have played it. If you deplete all their health before the round is over, then you've won that round. So that's a big change. So Yvette, quickly on this topic of the round-based system and the point gap. You haven't had a chance to officially fight in this. You're going to fight next week at Nationals with these kind of new rules, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how have you prepared mentally to fight in these new rules?
Well,
specifically these two changes, like point gap and the round base.
Yeah, point gap. Personally, for me, I feel the point gap is just not high enough because of the certain kicks that we have right now. So let's say I do a spinning hook kick to the head and it becomes 5 points, and then I score another 360 to the head area, and that's 10 points. And then the 2 other points can be easily given by either a body shot, a gamjang, or
even
very, very simply.
Right.
Yeah, like that. Yeah. Yes, the rounds will end faster if we do those kind of motions and do those kind of kicks, which I love. I mean, it's great for me, for my style, because I'm just high energy off the bat. But I do see matches ending really, really fast if people do that. But it is kind of forcing people to fight, which is what we want. But personally, I feel like if we had a higher point gap, it would kind of make the fight a little bit longer. I just feel like the points right now, with the given point system that we have, like 5 points for headshots with a spin, or even just a back kick, we do 3 back kicks,
Right.
It's a little bit fast for me, but
right. I did some research. I remember when trying to determine how much health to remove in a round, and what the amount of successful kicks should be in a round. So I thought about this. How many kicks should land in a round for a round to be over? Right? What is the right amount? And we landed on 10 kicks, because that's enough for an audience to feel like they've seen something of substance. Because again, if you do it in 2 kicks, it's like, oh, that's kind of lame, right? And again, this is also borrowed from video games as well. This sort of data analysis. And so, I also agree that if in any situation you can end a round in less than 2 techniques, then that's not a good thing. And so, yeah, I think that's also going to be a challenge. So, Coach Cesar, switching from IR to coach, are you suggesting for your athletes to do more of these techniques to end it earlier, or do you have other concerns about changing a strategy like that?
No, quite the opposite, because now the rounds can be finished with 4 conjunctions, and the risk of you getting kicked while it turned around, especially when you're turning and someone kicks you in the back and you fall down, the chance of you getting disqualified by penalties is much higher, since in the new rules you are only allowed to have 3 penalties per round. On the 4th round you're disqualified. Even though a turning kick that scores and you fall down, it's not deducted. The chances that you do a turning kick and it's not scored is much higher, so you will not risk it. The rules of pushing, the rules of fighting in clinch will push you more for a more direct attacks, very field control, field dominated matches, avoiding the penalties, because it gives you too much power to the referee and too little room for error. Another thing that I wanted to say on the 2 things that changed the rules is that the new round system is 2 minutes per round, and that for the cadets that used to be 1.5 minutes means that the matches are actually longer.
Right. Yeah, that's right. For the cadets to be longer. So the third rule change that is of significance, which I actually disagree with. So we talked about one of the biggest rules: whoever wins 2 out of 3 rounds, the point gap in the round, and then this third one we just kind of briefly talked about is gum jumps or minus points. So now if you have 4 minus points in a round, you lose that round. Bunch of challenges with that, as we discussed, puts too much control in the referee. And again, this isn't knocking referees, guys, by the way, just so you know. It's referees work within the rules they're given. They enforce rules that are told to enforce, and that is their job. So if you tell them rules to enforce and those rules don't make the game good, it's not the IR's fault, right? So just want to be clear on that. So right now, it's too much control for a referee to determine the victor of the match. And again, if we compare this to other pro sports, I always like to do what does soccer do? What does basketball do? Look at all the professional sports, American football. A referee never ever is able to give a point to a team ever. So if you look at soccer, if you create a foul, the referee doesn't say, okay, other team gets a point. It's like, no, the other team gets a chance to score a point. So this whole concept of giving away points, I think, is really flawed and broken and can lead to corruption, which the whole reason, if you're everywhere you remember, is why electronic scoring was introduced back a while ago, is to prevent that sort of corruption. So I think that's something that needs to be fixed a lot. And that's probably the first thing that needs to be fixed. So I want to first get your opinion, Yvette, on that, and then Cesar, on your thought on that, and then Cesar, how do you think we can fix that? How do you think they can change those rules? So Yvette, maybe ask you what your opinion is on the four guns and to lose a round.
Well, in my opinion, as an athlete, I would try my best not to get any gum jams. That's what I want to think about. And like Coach said, 4 gum jams, you're out, right? So I think that has kind of overshadowed a lot of what the rule changes are supposed to do to make our sport better. You know, having that gum jam, the 4 gum jam, really, like, everybody's just thinking about that now. Like, that's the fastest way to disqualify somebody.
And some people I've heard some people, that's the strategy, is to get them to get the gum jams, which is not
which is not
we want to see. Yeah, right.
Which is, like, we want to keep the sport alive, right? We want to see action. We don't want to see somebody trying to get disqualified, like falling down, stepping out, or doing something illegal. And it's really, I think, 4 gum jam, it's quite, it can get that really, really fast.
Yeah. Cesar, how do you think you fix that rule? Just add more?
The difference between most of the team sports and the combat sports is that the referee is not there only to enforce the fairness of the game, but also to ensure the safety of the players.
Yes.
Therefore, the fact that the penalties have an impact is important. And as you remember, before we used to lose points if you got a deduction, and to make it easier that the points add up, and for the audience to understand, they changed it that the penalties add points for the opponent. We could argue if it's the same to remove a point from the one who did the penalty, or to award the point to someone who just suffered the penalty. Again, that's a matter of public perception. Maybe it should be studied and polled. The audience should be questioned on those matters. But in case of the referee being able to decide the points, it is a safety issue. And if the referee doesn't have that power, doesn't have the control of the match, and it is a combat sport, we're all full combat, and therefore the safety of the players is important. Regarding the tactics with the kamjons, the WT published some rules that actually changed. In Spain, they changed the fact that the superiority based on kamjons could be played. For example, if I have a 5 or 6 point superiority on the first round, I just need to hold back on the second round for a tie, and then on the third round, wait, I have one tied round, one round that I won, and I have a superiority of 6 points. I can just fall down, step out 4 times. The other one gets 4 points for kamjon. We get each one of us gets a round. The middle round was tied, so we have 1 + 1. The first superiority criteria would be the points scored, and I would be the winner, even though I didn't fight on the second round, and in the third round I disqualified myself. So
right.
they did some changes, saying that the player that gets disqualified by kamjons on the third round loses the match. Something that I disagree, because 4 kamjons is something that can happen, especially in a dynamic match, and there should be a deduction or a disqualification for avoiding the match or for unfair play, not for a total disqualification because of the kamjons.
Well, let's discuss that a little bit more, because I think we disagree on that point. Because, and this is where, how healthy change comes around, where you have people who are passionate about what they do and come from different perspectives. And through this discussion, you can kind of see how to make changes better. So you're of the mind that the referees need to give warnings or points to other players because their primary role is to keep the safety of the athletes. So we agree that their primary role is to keep the safety of the athletes. I agree. But where the issue that I have is that why can you not keep the athletes safe but also not determine the outcome of a match? So I understand that the referee is trying to get the players' behavior to change so that they do things that are legitimate, so they don't do illegal things. But if we compare it to, let's say, UFC, so if I compared team sports before, but let's go to fighting sports, UFC, MMA. They don't. The referees play almost very little rules. Start playing very little engagement in the fight. They do look for the safety of the athletes, but don't determine the score. Very little. So, how would you interpret the way kind of MMA and UFC does their refereeing and scoring compared to?
You have to understand what is allowed in Taekwondo and what makes the game dynamic, and what distinguishes us from other striking sports like kickboxing or karate. UFC, you have pretty much, you cannot elbow the player if the other one is on the floor. You can't do some dirty attacks on the groin, but that's pretty much it. Everything else is allowed. So the referee doesn't have so many rules to enforce. That's why the presence there goes all the way to very little to ensure the safety of the match, much more to ensure that the audience like the brutality of the show. So I would not compare ourselves to that kind of combat sports.
So that's a good point. So Yvette, I wanted to ask you: should the referee have less things that they need to enforce? How would you feel as a fighter if it was just more open? And how would the match go that way, do you think?
Well, it only changed recently. I mean, before I remember having gamjangs and they didn't affect the score at all. We would have, and then it went to, I think, we had to have 2 gamjangs and then we lost a point or they gained a point.
It was the kyongos, yes, the kyongos.
The kyongos, yes. Yeah. So we don't have any kyongos anymore. And again, there's just so many changes. And now, I mean, we used to get a lot of warnings before, kyongos before, which didn't really mean anything. We would just get warnings. And I mean, that didn't give the referee any sort of power or any kind of deciding factor. But now I feel like with the referees doing that, I mean, it does kind of change the game, sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way. It really depends on which side you are. And now that, Coach, you say that it is about the safety and it is about how to, how they see the fight going on. I can see that. But I mean, as a fighter, obviously you don't want to be the one getting the gamjangs and the one to be losing all the points. And you don't want to have a referee kind of trying to decide based on their judgment, because every fighter thinks that they're right, right? But I mean, I do agree to a certain point, but if the thing is with the Kyongos, the Kamjangs, they basically can disqualify you with four Kamjangs.
The question with Yvette, with the previous rules, with the Kyongos and the Kamjans, you had two kinds of penalties. You had the light penalties that would be enforced with a warning, and two light penalties would allow you a big penalty, and you would have the big penalties. For example, before, hitting with the hand unintentionally or unintentionally to the face would be a first one, would be a warning, and you will only get a Kamjan if you really intentionally hit the face. And since there is no more Kyongos, every touch to the face will be but at the same time, they allow you to push and grab much more. And the thing that manipulating the matches via Kamjans exists, and it happens. But I find that much more worrisome, the fact that the punches are scored by the referees in a total unbiased criteria.
Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, if all points are scored electronically, why shouldn't the punches be, right? This is where we have that kind of, back and forth.
Right. Okay, so we talked about three things. And for those of us, for those or you that are on the stream and on watching, please leave your comments in the comment section. We'll address some of them at the end. We see some of them already coming in. Thanks for that. So we're reviewing some of the rule changes that World Taekwondo WT has been doing. And we've got an IR with us, international referee, former IR, an Olympian, and discussing the impacts of those. So we reviewed the round-based system. Whoever wins 2 out of 3 rounds is now the winner, as opposed to who has the most points at the end of third round. We discussed how if you have a point gap within a round, so if you're ahead of the person by 12 points, then you will win that round. And we talked about the referee being able to give away minus points or points to each side. And that, and if you get 4 of those, you lose a round. And we just discussed about how in other sports, both team sports and other individual sports like UFC, the differences between how they do it and why Taekwondo can or can't do it. So, Cesar, those are the 3 ones that we've talked about so far. Any other ones that are kind of have a big impact or misunderstood from the general public so far?
Well, regarding the new rules, for me as a coach, it is a positive thing that I can now ask for a video replay for a head scoring that didn't score. So if I kick the opponent's helmet and the helmet didn't score, the PSS failed, the protective scoring system, I can ask for a video replay and get the point back. That is a rule that I do like as a coach. I don't like as a Taekwondo person, because
the audience hates those rules.
Because it takes too long. It breaks the match. Video replay systems, they are not instant. It's not like the Olympics. We usually have poor cameras and very poor software, or people that don't know how to manage the software fast enough to give you a quick decision. The rules say 30 seconds. Sometimes it takes 2 to 3 minutes to identify the scoring or the not scoring. And the fact that we are only allowed to ask for if the PSS didn't work makes it quite a little strange. Why do that to the head, not do that to the vest? Because the vest also fails. I do understand that the heads are easier to calculate because there doesn't need to be a strong impact. But on the other hand, if you have a kick to the face and it's not touching the helmet, you're not allowed to ask for the video replay. And I've seen some referees in Spain allowing you to ask, and when I read the rules, it says you shouldn't. It's only if the system didn't score.
Okay, so that's a big one. As an audience member, I hate those rules because of this. Anytime there's a break in a match, it kills the audience, right? The interest for the audience. It slows the game down quite a lot, and that's frustrating to see. So, but yes, like you said, as a coach, for fairness, obviously you want to see the best athlete win, and that does help determine that. Okay, so video replay for head score is another significant change. What else would you say makes the list?
Well, my list is pretty big.
Is it really?
I
Is
wrote
it
it
that?
down.
Is it that many? Oh my gosh! So there's like, let's like maybe start with like, I always think about a problem is like, just wrapping your arm around the whole thing. How many significant changes do you think there are?
Well, there's at least half a dozen of them, the two or three we just mentioned.
Okay.
I think that the fact that the clinches are too long and you are not allowed to kick to the head in the clinch, some parts of the head
Right.
on the clinch, makes you play really hard, tough, and much pushing and grabbing in the clinching position without risking the headshots. Especially on the good head kicks on the clinch. I'm not talking about the crazy ones that you see done by people that have hyper flexibility, and most of them, even if they are very good, they are always preceding the technique by a fall. They're always grabbing you to be allowed to kick. And I'm talking about Olympic medalists, the big sensations out there. If you look at the videos, they are either before or during the kick, they are grabbing, allowing the opponent to be in a vulnerable position. And that is something that should be really enforced. The grabbing, pulling my opponent down so I can score a headshot in the clinch is something that should be enforced, should be forbidden, not minimizing the nice head kicks that you do in the clinch. Because people that have the physical anthropometric abilities to kick you, they have the skills, the body type to allow you to kick like this in the clinch. It's nice to see, and it's a good kick. Not telling me that a crescent kick or a scorpion kick is not taekwondo. Of course it is taekwondo. Even the tichagi was not taekwondo if you go back 40 years because it didn't exist in the textbook. So now when you go at the forbidding those techniques instead of forbidding the grabbing or paying close attention to the grabbing and pushing, and that, there's some really mean grabbing, especially if you look at the players when they take their uniforms in the end of the matches and they see the nail marks on the arms, and so that is the reality of the game. The referee should be paying attention to that, and they're not. What the players are doing now is pushing in a very ugly way. And if you look at the Spanish Open, you would see the females actually fighting in a very nice and very acrobatic way, and you would see the men pushing each other for 3 rounds, grabbing, playing like Wing Chun Kung Fu with the arms. So if the referee is on this side, I'm grabbing from the other side. If I grab from the other side.
And just to be clear, to understand what this rule means, and I see Master Santos, you have a question about cannot impede kicking with the legs. We'll get to that. I'm pretty sure that's probably one of the top 6 that Coach Cesar has in there. So no kicking in the clinch. So basically that means you're in the clinch. You cannot hold and kick at the same time. That's the basic interpretation of the rule, right?
Yeah. Well, it's the interpretation of the rule is that if you are one of your arms is crossing the upper body of the other one, even if you're not holding, it's considered a clinch, and you're not supposed to kick on the head.
Right. So I think we disagree on actually. I want to hear your opinion on that one. So, Coach, you were saying that you don't like that rule. You like the kicks that came out of the clinch over time as they developed. They aren't kicks that we used to do back in our days, but you believe that they are an evolution of the sport, and just like some of the kicks didn't exist before. So you like.
I'm okay with the kicking as long as they are clean and not preceded by a fall. If they're preceded by a penalty of me grabbing, pushing, punching in someone else before I kick, then it should be allowed.
Okay, Yvette, what's your interpretation of this kick in the clinch?
I actually do agree with that, because it is hard to find yourself in that kind of position without grabbing or without holding or without manipulating the other athlete into a position to do those certain kicks, because your body just simply can't do that kind of kick without moving the athlete. So, I mean, if you can do that, great, good for you. You can't change somebody else's body. You can't change the way they fight, but you can change the beforehand and how you get there. I mean, if I could do those kind of things, sure, that'd be great. But the grabbing and the manipulating of the body to put the athlete in a very vulnerable position to be kicked in that kind of way, I don't think should be allowed. But the thing is, I feel like they're just, the rules that have been changing is a certain kind of kicks you can do, but right now they're getting into, they're getting closer, which is like you're not allowed to be in that position. But I don't feel it can change a lot, but it's getting there. Coming into that clinch with putting your hand through the other opponent. I mean, there's just a lot of things that we have to think about. And I remember fighting, where was it? I think it was World Championships in one year, that they changed the rules that you cannot clinch like this. So what I saw in these final fights were these two amazing fighters who normally would come into clinch and push out and kick or something like that, but they would come into clinch, and when they were at the clinch, they freaked out. Both hands came up like this. So two players were basically like this with each other, like this, and trying to kick each other, which looks very, very silly, because that was that first game that the rule changed. And I feel like after that, they had to change it again, saying you can clinch and then you can push, you can do this. But then when they added that one in where you can push, all you saw were these people who were physically stronger pushing their opponent all the way out to get a gamjang. And I saw that many times. A player that was amazing got disqualified because that person was just stronger in pushing. And our sport is not pushing. Our sport is fighting. Right. So I feel like that's the difficulty in finding the right rules to make that happen. And I think like they're just trying to find what works, because you can't just make a rule and expect it to be better. You make a rule, you use it, and you see how players fight. You see how players, I don't want to say manipulate, but find ways to make the best out of the system.
Right. Yeah. So I have a different opinion from you, Coach Cesar, on that, on the kicking and the clinch. I believe that there is no kick that should be done when two bodies, or any attack for that matter, or punch as well, when the bodies are close together. Yes, you can do some of the kicks that they're doing, but I don't think that an audience would appreciate it in terms of, yes, it's flexible, but in terms of the way it delivers power, and especially in today's rules where you just graze or touch and you get 3 points, compared to something that looks like it takes a little bit more effort from a greater distance. I think there's a misalignment there. So my opinion is to not have any scoring when you're too close. And if you remember pre-electronic scoring, you still can't kick in the clinch, but you have to move your body back a little bit to really kind of get the inside roundhouse kick. So you have to have a certain amount of distance. I believe that would be a better solution, but you need some sort of technology to be able to do that, to determine distance.
But we can agree to disagree on that one, because on the old rules you are not allowed to hit on the back of the torso.
Right.
Therefore, the kicks that would have to be performed from a little distance, so you could only score to the side and to the front of the torso. Since now you are allowed to hit to the back of the torso, especially if your vest is really too tight and covers the back almost all the way to the spine. The short crescent kicks, very fast kicks on a short distance will work. So creating a minimum distance between the players will stop those kicks from happening, and will also forbid the players that have different anthropometrics, the shorter players, to get closer for the close combat kicks. Because if the other one is very long legs, how can I get inside? I need to go into a shorter distance. So the distance, and then we can agree to disagree on that one. For me, the distance should not be a criteria.
Right. Great. As you can see, some of the stuff that we're talking about obviously don't have simple solutions, and there's different opinions. And what really kind of, and you never know how it kind of plays out, right? I think people have the best intentions for rules, and then they implement them, and then they don't necessarily get implemented the way that people think. So, so that's great. So we've gone through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of some of the major rule changes so far that have kind of made a big change in WT World Taekwondo rules. Quickly, before we get into the next ones, and I see some of the comments coming in and questions, that's great. I want to bring up 2 things on the 2020 Armor and United Battle League side. So we can help your athletes train and get to reach your full potential. We measure a lot of data and help you understand stuff about your training that you maybe never understood before. You can find out more on 2020armor.com. And then I also created a new professional martial art league called the United Battle League, which also is powered by 2020armor.com. And you can check out the free show at ubl.gg. And it actually uses a lot of the rules that we are talking about now. So it will be interesting to see kind of how the players fought in the UBL with the rules that have been slightly modified. Okay, great. So we talked about 5 of the significant rules. What makes number 6, Coach?
It's not written, but on the Spanish Open they presented that. It's actually, you can look at the video from the technical meeting the coach meeting. They had an online meeting. It's on the Spanish Federation YouTube, where they specifically tell you that you are only allowed to kick twice. If you kick third time, even if the second or the first kick scored, you will get a kamjon, and that's something that is a very old fighting style, the European fighting style. You are very active, and in the time frame of 3 seconds, you are allowed to do 3, 4, 5 kicks. You see that also some African players doing it, and now with these rules that you kick twice and the third one is a kamjon, it's not fair, because it's the players that are very fast and they are able to change and correct the target, the direction of their kick very fast, will be penalized and will not allow you to actually play with the ability of scoring or aiming at different points and correcting and finting and doing all the fake movements that it's important in Taekwondo.
So I just want to clarify this for people who are listening.
They said it.
So I just want to clarify something. So you mean 3 kicks? So people who are listening, it's not actually 3 kicks to the body like you're scoring, right? It's 3 kicks in the air.
Right.
No. If you kick twice with the same leg, the third kick, if you do it, it's a penalty. So if you go, for example, Yop Dolyu, and then you do a hook kick, and if you do that, the hook kick will be a kamjon, even if even if the first 2 actually scored. And that's something that again, it was not written, but it was explained, and the referees were enforcing that one. And I think it's, again, one of those rules that are out of a box for
this one. I didn't understand this one. I don't understand as much. So I thought the intention of the rule, the spirit of the rule, is to get rid of the hanging the leg up there for a cut kick, allow more action to happen. Yes. But you're saying this can also interpret to, again, if you did a hook kick and then a round kick, the same leg, that's 2. That counts as 2. So the second one, if you hit with the second one, it doesn't count.
The third one, yeah. If you do a roundhouse, hook kick, roundhouse, the third one.
Yeah, without putting it down.
Without putting it down, right. So it's not 3, like if you did 3 roundhouse kicks, boom, 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 that's okay. It's just same leg, keeping in the air. So they want to basically try to bring the leg down more as opposed to keeping it up there the whole time.
Yeah, the question is that the old rules already predicted that and they already enforced that. So now they're taking a little bit too extreme. That's one of the rules. And again, we can talk about all these rules, but what the referees actually enforce, it's never the same. And the same with the kicking to the back of the head in the clinch, as we mentioned before. It is forbidden. Yet, just look at the video streaming from the Spanish Open, and you will see happening thousands of times without getting one single penalty.
So that's a good point. So so you're saying this rule of keeping your leg in the air is already previous to all these changes been in there, but just really wasn't enforced. And you're thinking now that I guess it's been re-brought up or rethought of, that maybe it'll get more attention from referees to enforce, or do you think it'll also kind of fall by the wayside and kind of get forgotten about?
Well, I think they are pushing it too hard to go old school and back legs. Even though that's not the fighting style that we do in the Western world. And trying to push us to fight a way that only the Koreans do, I think it's not fair for an Olympic sport. The second part is we talked, and I saw some of the comments about the leg fencing. Now that you are very restricted in the limitations of the kamjons and running away and the distance control, moving sideways to get a better position, a better angle, get out of the attacking line, will also be penalized, as the same as avoiding the match. How can you actually defend a very strong front leg? And the front legs are still there. So for you to defend the very strong front leg, it needs to be with a front leg counterattack. Not just the canceling, not just the chamber technique and all the canceling techniques, but also the kicking with the front leg. And that's something that the rules said that canceling or impeding the attack with the front leg would be forbidden. That's actually a nonsense, since you are not allowed to defend or go away from the attack. Not being able to use your legs to impede the attack, it would be actually very hard. I understand if it's only impeding and only canceling, but not counterattacking. And what I saw in the Spanish Open was that they were not giving any deductions for that. As long as you impede and you counterattack with the same leg, you are not gonna get a kamjon. And the thing is, most of the times you don't get into the distance of doing a second motion and doing a counterattack after blocking or canceling with the leg. Therefore, there was a lot of leg canceling and no deductions for that. And I think most of the audience that is wondering about that, that's the reality. They did leg canceling like they did 2 months ago and nothing happened.
Right. Okay, so that's the sixth one. That's your half dozen or so. If you had to force one more in the top six, which one would you put in there? And by the way, so we're coming up to we'll have some time for the Q&A. So I know a lot of you guys have put some questions in there. So if you don't now, maybe we already answered some of your questions based on the dialogue. So if you have some burning questions that you'd like to ask Cesar or Yvette or myself, please put them in the comments, and we will try to address them. So, Coach, we talked about the six. What would you say is one other significant one in there that people need to think about?
For me, it's the if there would be a seven, it would be the rule regarding avoiding the match. It would be just 3 steps out, or just turning your back and trying to recover your position. Because most of the times, when you are exchanging techniques with your opponent and you need to recover balance and a fighting position, you need to turn around and go back into the stance. You need to
so
maybe
can you explain
sideways.
this one? Because I thought this one already existed for a while, or these one of these other rules that kind of coming back into life.
It always exists that you cannot turn your back, but now they're enforcing that any single motion that you were turning around and stepping backwards, we would allow you to give a counter. And that's the difference between me turning around and running away from an attack.
Right.
Well, there's a difference between me kicking, missing the target, turning around, recovering my position. And that's something that it should be better clarified in the rules. And luckily, the referees are still quite confused about the new rules. There was no referee education. The first referee seminar is going to be in Baku next month. So there's still a little bit of adaptation to the new rules, and that one has not been enforced too much. But there's a difference between avoiding the match and recovering my position to counterattack. And that's something that the rules should be a little more, or either remove it or a little bit more flexible to understand that.
Right. Yvette, going into because you're going to fight with these new rules in 1 week at the Canadian Nationals, which determines who gets to go to Pan Am Championships and Worlds, I believe. So pretty significant game. Out of these main rules that we kind of talked about, there's a lot of them, and you know that a lot of referees probably have never enforced these rules, and they're going to be new to all of this. What's your mindset going to be? What are you going to focus on? Which rules are you going to kind of use to your advantage and really try to win the game?
I think I don't want to say the easiest, but the one I see that's going to affect everybody the most is probably the gamjans. But other than that, for me, I don't really do a lot of all these rule changes that they're implementing, like 3 kicks with 1 leg, and the moving backwards, or clinching too long or not fighting too long. I love to fight, so that doesn't really apply to me. But I mean, there's a lot of things that we have to think about, especially with referees. Now, Cesar, sir, I know you don't like it when I call you sir, coach. Do you think that there are too many rule changes for referees to be focused on? I mean, there's already, I remember in my fight in Belgium, I scored a spinning hook kick. It was really fast. I scored a spinning hook kick. There was 3 points, and they didn't add the 2 points. And then not long after that, I scored a 360 to the body, and no 2 points were added on after that. I mean, everybody was just so focused on the fight, even me, even my coach, even the spectators, that simple rule change that we had for a long time, adding those 2 points, wasn't even noticed. Now, with all these rule changes, I don't think it's going to affect the athletes as much, because I feel like it's so much for referees to keep up with,
Well, I think the referees, we're underestimating the referees. Most of the referees, they are very smart. They're very professional.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
The only part from our sport that is not totally professional are the referees, because we as coaches are professionals, US players are professionals, the equipment manufacturers are professionals, and the referees are some volunteers who buy their own uniforms, pay their own airfares to go to tournaments and work like slaves for 12 hours, sometimes even more. So the referees, we have to understand that the rules change a lot, because they are trying to adapt to the what we as coaches and we as players find out from the equipment, from the adaptation of the rules. If you look at the Taekwondo history for the first 20 years, since 1973, from the first World Championships up to 2012, so the first 30 years, we had barely no changes.
Right.
We had every 3-4 years a change, something limited. It was always the Korean version that was the one that would be, in case of a dispute, the one that would be the correct one. And it changed with time. It changed in the early 2000s with the new WT president. New 20 years ago, it was new. The English version is the official version, and of course, since the TPSS started to be introduced, we started seeing a lot of changes, and so many that the changes that they publish now are not yet the official ones. Saying, when I hear you say that you're going to fight the national team trials or the Canadian championships with the new rules, when I know that the continental championships are, most of them, especially the ones in Europe, are going to be with the old rules. I'm not sure about the Part 2 games. I think it's still going to be with the old ones, because the official ones are only supposed to be out in June. The system for the PSS, the scoreboard system, is not out yet. The system for the new rules, it's not concluded. I've been last week in Barcelona, and they still haven't finished the final versions. The versions that I got 2 weeks ago, after Belgium and before Spain, are still not final. They had a version for Belgium that was, we saw it, full of bugs. The version in Spain had full of bugs. I trained with that one because I got it a few days before Spanish Open. And I already got a new one that's still not official. So and it's not out there. I don't know how you guys gonna do national team trials when the scoreboard is not ready and the rules are.
Maybe we'll go back to pen and paper.
Yeah, that's always pen and paper.
Well, the Pan American Games, I don't know if they're going to be with the new rules, but I know that the European Championships are going to be with the old ones.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so we talked, Yvette, about how this kind of impacts your game. As you mentioned, not so much, because these rules seem to be kind of favor for your type of fighting and style. But Coach Cesar, do you think this? Are you changing the way now you identify talent based on these new rule changes? Because there's quite a lot, and as you said, it really kind of favors the athlete that kicks a lot more. I know today's game, even without the rule change, you still have to kick a lot, but you really have to be an aggressor. Your stamina has to be from the first second you turn on. Like, you can't turn on 30 seconds in, because a loss of a round is significant. Changes the way you think, changes the way you fight, changes confidence levels. Are you making any significant changes on how you ID talent? Now, let's put it into context. Obviously, I know Austria is a small country, similar to Canada in terms of number of fighters, but let's say that wasn't the restriction. Like, you had all the athletes in the world, and let's say you had all the athletes in the world, and the way you used to ID talent before the rules and now with the new rules, would that change?
Well, the characteristics of our sport did not change just because these rules changed. You will still, we call it ectomorphic, but let's put it in normal language. People with long limbs, long legs, long arms will always have an advantage. It's the same if I go fighting, if I go sword fighting or street fighting with a knife, and you come with a sword, you will probably going to win because your blade is longer than mine. That's the same with boxing. It's the same with jiu-jitsu. It's the same with all kind of combat sports where reach is important. And if my legs and arms are longer, I can reach you before you come into my distance. So in terms of talent identification, in terms of body type, doesn't change. What it changed is the training systems and the fact that the physical abilities of having a lot more endurance will probably need to be changed. Taekwondo is not a sport that needs too much endurance training. It does need repeated sprint training. It does need a different kind of endurance, a lot of high-intensity interval training. But the biggest component of our sport is still speed strength. It's still the ability to produce power in the shortest period of time in very extreme angles of our limbs. We need to be able to be powerful at almost doing the split position in very big angles. And that's a characteristic from our sport. In terms of the energy that you need, the kind of player, if is a player that has a lot more endurance than the other, it can only be identified after they actually go into a higher level, because each weight division will have a different fighting style. The Yvette's weight division will fight totally different from the heavyweight girls, and when you look at the body type, you also need to look at the combat style from the weight division and from the player, and that will only allow I will only be able to understand those energy needs in terms of work and rest ratios in terms of sports science once I get a few matches that allow me to create a player profile. Let me put it in common terms. I need to see at least 5-6 matches at a high level with the same pressure with the high level opponents to identify how my players work. And right now I can tell you, when you were fighting, for each second that you kicked, you had 17 seconds that you didn't do anything. The ratio of work and rest in terms of old school taekwondo was 1:17 to 1:18. Right. So the boring matches that we now forget that they were 3 minutes long and quite not so packed with action, they don't exist anymore. The new players, they have, for each second of active work, because the clinch also counts as an active work, you have 1 second of rest, or 1 to 2. So the difference is I do 3-4 seconds action. I can have 3-4 seconds when I'm just stepping, moving around, or defending myself from the opponent. And that's it. The matches are much more active. And for me to identify the new work and rest profiling of my players, I need to have 5 or 6 high-level combats to profile them. And we had Spanish Open. We had a few test matches in a camp. After that, right now I'm around 6-7 matches with one of my players, and I still have 20 other players to analyze because they still need to go to Sweden Open, to European Championships, to other events, so I can create the kind of energetic demand for a player. And then ideally I would go and search for that player that has the ability to produce force, power, and also keep up with the repeated intervals, and having it a much more active match. So it's right now it's a talent identification. Maybe for the national teams, yes. For me as a local center, size of a club, it's not realistic right now.
Right. Okay. So in the last 5 minutes, Master Senpai, there you asked for someone to link you to the new rules. We'll link to them. A little bit, we'll link to them in the comments a little bit later. Just wanted to ask anybody if they had any specific questions for Coach Cesar or myself. Looks like we lost Yvette, but we can ask, if you ask the questions in the comments, we can ask her to respond. So now is your chance to ask anything specific to us. And let me just kind of go through the comments as well. Oh, Yvette is back. Let me put her back in. Where is she? Okay, well, I'll figure that out in a second when she comes in. Oh, there you are. You're going in and out, Yvette.
Yeah,
Is it your internet?
Back, yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. So someone asked to link to the new rules. We'll do that. Coach Santos, Raymore Santos asked, as a referee, do you believe there is a shortage of referees?
Well, that's for me.
Yeah.
Well, we have a big number of referees. I assume we have around 1,500 referee licenses active right now. The question is, in the worldwide. And right now, you have to understand, events like I remember Austrian Open with 18 courts needing 160 referees.
Right.
Okay? And we have events almost every week during the competition season. So for people taking weekends away from their family, paying their own airfares to go to competitions every week, it's not realistic, and it's not fair. What we do have is too many referees that are not professionally engaged into the sport. They go home after the competitions and they don't train. They don't see any athletes. They don't see taekwondo for 2-3 weeks, and then they go to the next competition. So basically, the only contact they have with the sport is in competitions. They don't have any contact between competitions, and there's a lot of those referees. They do a career as referees without doing the rest of their homework when they're home. For that, we have not a shortage of referees. We have a shortage of good referees. and that can be changed with the rules. With all the electronic equipment we have, do we really need so many referees? Do we really need a technical assistant, a video review jury, 3 corner judges, plus 1 central referee? We just need to improve the technology. We're having gyroscopes, accelerometers, all this kind of technology. We don't even need a referee for the punches. Maybe remove the punches or create a scoring system for the punches. Remove the technical point from being scored by the referee, making it automatically. You don't need to have a technical assistant and a review jury done by 2 different people. In para taekwondo, for example, they changed the rules last year that you can have the person that does the review jury also has the paper sheet and write down the things in case there's a technical failure. In the end, you would be able to run a court with 2 referees if the technology was there.
Right.
And that would allow you to have a set of 50, 60 good referees per region that would even be professional and probably make a living out of this.
That's a great point. And some of the comments that came in as well is it's too complex from the amount of staff on the floor to letting the technology do a lot of the complexity that we know it can do. Again, that's what we're trying to fix and solve at 2020 Armor. A lot of these things we have accelerometers, gyroscopes, trying to minimize the amount of human intervention needed, and make it easy for the general public to understand, and just make the game more fair, fun, and exciting. So that's what we're trying to do. That's our path. And so yes, Master Isaacs, we can help fix that, and we see some of those changes actually happening if you guys are watching. So we're talking about these new rule changes that applies to WT overall, but in Korea they're having a new pro league called Power Taekwondo, which uses they're experimenting with a lot of these rules, which we have as well, which is fantastic. The UBL, the new league that we created, that's powered by 2020 Armor, also goes in that direction. So I think the direction is people are seeing that this is the right direction to go into, and there'll be some changes along the way to and learnings along the way. But I really believe that some of the major changes you need for the sport to get to the next level and fix a lot of the challenges we have is the round-based system, which WT is doing, which is fantastic. And the next thing I think needs to be fixed, it needs to go to energy scoring. I think it'll fix a lot of these challenges that we have when it comes to the complexity and making it difficult to understand. And then the penalties would be a third one, and the way to apply those. So well, we are past the hour. Thank you everybody who joined us and left comments. And if we haven't gotten to them on the live stream, we'll get to them in the comment stream. Coach Cesar, had a blast. Thank you for your time and coming in all the way from Austria. And Yvette, nice to see you as always. I'll see you tomorrow at the office. And if there's if we feel that there's still a lot of unanswered questions, then maybe we can get together again and address some of those. I think it'd probably be good anyways, as we kind of see some of these new games being played out. So Yvette, you're competing next week at Canadian Nationals, and Coach Cesar, I'm not sure which international games you're going to next, but I'm sure some of those things we'll get some more learnings out of that, and maybe we can share that with the community as well.
Absolutely.
Great.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Coach. I really appreciate all the information, all your knowledge. It's very, very helpful to not only us, but to everybody.
Thank you, Yvette. It was nice. Well, seeing you again. See you next time, and thank you, Wally.
Thank you, Cesar.
Awesome.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.